Hi everybody, it's Bleish with the Future of Freedom Foundation, and today's episode of Focus on Freedom is going to be about a very controversial subject: borders. Many of you know that I am currently living in Mexico, and I love it. I came down last spring for Acapulco, and I fell in love with the culture here. I love how abundantly I can live. I love the people. I love the food. It's an amazing place to be. So right now, I'm in a really unique position, and I have a growing and evolving perspective on borders and the relationship between countries that are sharing a geographic area. Now, we all know that Texas used to be Mexico, right? We all know that the ownership or who is governing land has changed over time, space, and history. But what hasn't changed are the fact that human beings, real people, continue to live in those geographical areas. They continue to do business. They continue to have families, to make love, to live life to its fullest. And what I would like to advocate today is that government has no role whatsoever in the free movement of people or goods across arbitrary lines drawn on a map. So let's start by taking a look at this from different angles. There's the moral angle. Is it okay, ethically, for one group of people to control the movement of another group of people? Is it okay morally for someone to tell me when I can go to another place on this planet or how I can get there? No. Nobody has the right to control my movement. I have a right to travel. I have a right to live in Texas or live in Mexico or live in Alaska, Canada, or move to Europe. It doesn't matter. When we are talking about ethics, there is absolutely no reason that any individual or group of individuals should assume what they consider the right or the authority to dictate when and where people can be. Now, I understand many people are concerned about criminals coming into the country, but this is what I would like to remind you. Laws do not control people. Laws do not make us safe. If they did, we would not have the type of crimes and violent crimes that are taking place all across the globe, because our planet is covered by governments who have assumed authority over specific geographic regions and are creating laws in the name of safety and order. And yet, when it comes down to it, there is no safety or order created by words written on paper. When we want to combat what we see as criminal activities that are violating the rights of other people, this is a cultural issue. And this comes back to what we are teaching and modeling for our children in the home and in society at large. Morally, ethically, it is not okay for you to tell me where I can and cannot be, especially if I am not violating the rights of any other human beings. I don't have the right to tell you where you can or cannot be, and none of us have the right to tell people born in Mexico that they cannot come into the United States. We are free, sovereign individuals. And when that is expressed to its fullest extent, that means that we have the right to travel. We have the right to be nomadic. We have the right to relocate. And no government can take this away from us. So if we're talking about criminals and we're living in a place of fear, I want you to understand that your words written on paper will not stop criminals from coming into the country. It may prevent good-hearted people who want to do the right thing and follow your rules. But criminals are going to go jump through any hoops that they need to jump through. They're going to lie, they're going to sneak, they're going to distort the truth, they're going to manipulate, steal, whatever it takes, because that's what criminals do. Words on paper don't stop burglaries from taking place. Words on paper don't stop the police from abusing people. Okay? Words on paper do not stop governments from growing out of control. Have you seen what the Constitution has allowed? A lot of crime coming from the quote-unquote powers that be, right? It is not a valid argument that creating a wall will keep out criminals, because all that is going to do is keep you in the United States and keep good-hearted people from other countries out of the United States. Criminals who want to cross the border will find a way to cross the border. And there will be criminals who specialize in climbing the wall, going under the wall, rerouting around the wall, or finding other ways into the country. Creating a wall creates a black market for smuggling people. That is enabling human trafficking. This is not what we want happening on our planet, is it? When we are talking about borders and boundaries that lie over geographic locations, it makes absolutely no sense to try and keep certain people out in the name of safety, because criminals will find their way in no matter what. And unless you want to be isolated in a little box with a government growing in its tyrannical behavior, you might start to rethink this concept of building a wall. Most people know that right now in the United States, there are Border Patrol checkpoints that go a certain amount of miles into states like Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. I got stopped at one of these. My family got stopped at one of these when we were driving to Freedom's Phoenix event, the Freedom Summit in Arizona in 2014. We had 2 babies in the car. And the Department of Homeland Security stopped us in the middle of the road and demanded to see our IDs. Well, we refused. They are not authorized by the Constitution. If we're talking about constitutional government, and I'm not, I am talking about freedom here. These people, these individuals wearing badges and holding guns don't have a right to demand papers, please, from me, and I was not about to teach my children that they need to be subservient to random stranger pirates standing on the side of the road demanding money, IDs, or anything from them. In fact, I wanted to model to my young children what it actually looks like to stand up for yourself. And while we waited in the vehicle, these DHS officers, they did things like kick the side of our brand new car, our brand new van that, well, new to us, that still had dealer plates on it, shaking the vehicle. And we would say, please stop kicking our car. And they would say, we're not kicking your car, while they were doing it. They took a drug dog and they went all around our minivan, scratching the paint, telling the dog to jump up, scratching the paint on both sides of our brand new minivan. We refused to ID. We sat there. We waited. A sheriff came and he was just like, y'all are crazy. You could have already been in Phoenix by now. But that wasn't the point. That wasn't the point. For us, the point was modeling the right movement, the right decision for our children. And it was not to comply with papers, please, from strangers who have no right to demand ID from us on the side of the road. The sheriff agreed, and he let us go. And off to Phoenix we went. But we got off lucky. There are people who have been beat up for refusing to ID, very badly, bloody. There was a pastor in Arizona. You can Google this stuff. It's not something I like to watch or give energy to, because it's really painful and violent and gross, but it's the truth. And this has happened many, many times. And there are many people who don't know they have a right to not comply, so they don't even consider it, and they just show their ID, they show their ID, they show their ID. So what is happening right now in the United States in the name of borders is actually a mass effort by the Department of Homeland Security to ID people driving in the United States, people who are not even crossing the border, but people who are close to the border. And this is a violation of our rights. If we're talking about constitutional government, this is a violation of our rights to be free from unlawful search and seizure. But we're not talking about constitutional government. We are talking about freedom. And nobody has a right to point a gun at me and say, show me an ID. This is not ethical human behavior. This is costing taxpayer money. This is traumatizing people, and it is violating our rights en masse. Not okay. Not the way we want things to be functioning on this planet, right? Now, there's another angle I want to look at this. I'm somebody who has lived in the Midwest. I've lived in California. I've lived in Texas, and now I live in Mexico. I have seen firsthand the work ethic of Mexican people. When I worked for United Parcel Service as a safety compliance supervisor, I was in the warehouse for 3 different shifts, for the drivers, for the loaders at night, and the loaders in the morning. And I watched how hard these people worked. And there's this, they took our jobs kind of mentality that comes out of the United States sometimes. And I want to explain something to you. 1, nobody has a right to a job. No employer is obligated to hire anybody, and no individual is entitled to work anywhere. You are not entitled to work, okay? If you don't want to accept the salary that a company is willing to pay, but someone from Mexico who can live with way more abundance from that same amount of money and sees that as a pay raise is willing to come do that job, there's no reason that this should be a problem. Well, you may argue, but they're taking resources from the United States and they're spending them in Mexico. I would like to remind you that people who are working in the United States are also paying rent in houses. They're paying for gasoline. They're buying or renting cars or taking taxis or buying bicycles. They are shopping at the grocery store. They're going to the movies. They're buying furniture. They're buying clothing. They are actively participating in the economy. If by your logic, then them sending money to their family back home is somehow draining the economy, then isn't it draining the economy for people living in the United States to put their money in savings and not spend it at all? By working and living in the United States, Mexicans are able to bring in more abundance than they can, well, sometimes and often than they can here in Mexico. And that dollar stretches a lot further when you're down here. $1 right now is the equivalent of 20 Mexican pesos. My grocery shopping bill here in Mexico is 25% of what it was in the United States. My rent, walking distance to the beach, is less than I could pay for a studio in a rundown part of Austin, Texas. You can live abundantly here on very little money. So this shouldn't be a problem, people coming to the United States and working and participating in the economy. What they do with their excess money is none of our business. Truly, it's not. Well, you gotta pay them living wages, you say. Well, what if the wages that they voluntarily agree to accept are enough for them? It may not be enough for you, so why would you want to demand that job be given to you instead? Wouldn't you rather look for a higher paying job? And if you're not qualified right now, why don't you go get the qualifications or accept that these types of positions pay less? Or maybe you could move to Mexico where your money stretches much further and you don't have to worry and function in a place of lack and fear, because that's what this is. When you see hardworking people from another place on the planet coming to work in your place on the planet, and you feel afraid or lack because they're taking your jobs, that's coming from fear. And it's coming from a place that lacks ingenuity, creativity, drive, and even an entrepreneurial spirit. What I have witnessed down here in Mexico are entrepreneurs everywhere. People vending on the beach, people giving horseback rides, people renting ATVs, people selling crafts they made, food they made, not just on the beach, but on the streets everywhere here in Mexico. There are entrepreneurs hustling and working very, very hard. You don't see this in the United States. And part of that is because of the system of government that makes it, one, very hard to do business in the United States, and two, the bloated welfare system that has made a lot of people feel very comfortable doing not much at all. And really, think about it. People migrate across the United States all the time. Right now, there are a ton of people moving to Texas from California because the cost of living is lower, there's a lot of work opportunity, and there's a lot of land and places to build houses and build a family and start a life. It's easier to do that in Texas compared to California. Now, to be honest, as someone who's lived in Texas for 9 years now, there are Texans who have a problem with Californians coming and sort of infiltrating the culture. But no one's building a wall around Texas. No one's advocating for this because it's immoral, it's unethical, and financially it doesn't make sense at all. It really doesn't. You want people to come live in your community if you want economic abundance. And by allowing people to come from other places, be they states or countries, all you are doing is stimulating the economy at large. And that is a win-win for everybody. So here's the deal. You have the right to be afraid. You have the right to be afraid that Mexicans coming into the United States is going to take economic resources. You have the right to be afraid that an open border means criminals will come into your quiet, crime-free society. No, the United States is pretty full of crime, actually. So you have a right to feel this way. You have a right to these beliefs. What you don't have a right to is controlling the movement of other people. Because here's the deal. Throughout history, who has governed certain geographic areas has always been fluid. It changes. Sometimes it takes decades, sometimes it takes centuries, but there is an ebb and a flow to who is assuming control and power over a geographic region. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, they don't have control over the region. Nobody has power enough to stop people from coming in and leaving unless you have a complete and total dictatorship like North Korea. And yet, people still get in and out. Where has stronger border control? Let's think about this. People break laws. Politicians break laws, law enforcement breaks laws, and the average citizen breaks laws. Your words on paper don't stop criminals. Your walls on a border won't stop criminals. And anything you feel or think or project out into the world will not stop crime from happening. The only thing that can help shape our society into one of greater peace and greater harmony is making cultural changes, and those start at home, in our family. No government has a right to that. No government has control over that. No government has a right to control borders. No individuals have a right to control borders. We are free, sovereign people, and we have a right to roam the globe as we so please. I know this conversation is controversial, and I have not intended to offend anybody, although I know I might be hitting some hot button triggers. And that's okay. Let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation. I really look forward to it. The philosophy debate, the criminal debate, the economic debate, the moral debate, whatever it may be. Let's have an open dialogue. And why don't we meet our neighbors? How many of you advocating for a wall have been to Mexico? I hadn't been until about 8 months ago, and my perception and ideas have radically changed. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Focus on Freedom. Please be sure to follow us on Facebook and YouTube and visit our website, fff.org, where you can subscribe to our email list. Have a great day.